Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here. Thanks for tuning in to another installment of my complete analysis of all 389 Bach chorale harmonizations. We're going to be looking at solch, einzu, dein, and toren, which roughly translates to, O enter, Lord, thy temple. It's kind of like an old English translation. This is an interesting chorale. I don't know what to make of a couple of the cadences here, but I'm going to stay consistent with my analysis and explain my line of reasoning as I've done in pretty much all the videos. Actually, all of the videos. That's just sort of the way that these videos have taken form. When I started the channel, I didn't know exactly what was going to come of it, but I think I have a pretty effective organization, just analyzing in a mostly linear fashion and talking about things as they come up. So, let's start off by analyzing the key. We start with an A minor triad, we end with an A major triad. We know there's a Picardy third in play at the final cadence. I think we're in the key of A minor. Then we start off with a 1 chord, of course. And then we have the same chord, but the bass leaps up an octave. This is a convention of Bach's. He does this quite often. If it's not just the bass that's moving, it's a couple of other voices. G sharp, B, E, and B. That's an E major triad in first inversion, or a 5-6 chord. I also sharpened my pencil, which is pretty good. It was getting kind of dull, making the analysis, even with this massive margin at the bottom, kind of difficult. And then we have A, E, and C. There's just another 1 chord. If we look ahead, we have a cadence on G major. Now, I don't know about you, but if you go back and listen to the chorale up until this point, ask yourself what kind of cadence it is. The first time I heard it, it sounded like a half cadence in C major. And then I listened to it so many more times, I listened to it at least a dozen more times, and then it sounded like an authentic cadence in G major. I really couldn't decide which one it was. But I decided I couldn't really convince myself. Is this a half cadence? Is this an imperfect authentic cadence? I think what's kind of tripping me up here is the fact that imperfect authentic cadences and half cadences, when they're preceded by their own dominant, like a secondary dominant, if we were thinking in terms of the key of C major, that would make it sound like an authentic cadence. But what makes it sound like a half cadence is that this D sounds like the 2 of the scale rather than the 5 of the scale. But then I listened to it so many more times that it started to sound like G, and I don't know if I undermined my own analysis. But the way it sounds to me, it sounds like we have a modulation to G major here, and we have an imperfect authentic cadence. That's what it sounds like now. So we're going to call this A chord right here, right before we get the F sharp, our common chord. A minor is now the supertonic, not the tonic. We then have a D major triad in first inversion. That's now our 5. And then we have G, G, D, and B. It's a 1 chord. Passing tone in the tenor. We have some more counterpoint going on here as well. It's kind of like a little 7. There's a little bit of a 7 going on here over this G. Do you see that? F sharp, A, and C. So this G is kind of functioning like a pedal, but we'll just call those passing tones. And then we have G, B, G, and D. So really what ends up happening is we just get this big 5 and then 1 cadence that takes 3 beats to really establish. If we look ahead to the end of the first section, we get a perfect authentic cadence in the key of A minor. So we know there's a modulation that occurs. And I think the modulation occurs right here when we get the G sharp, right? It's kind of, for all intents and purposes, it sounds like a direct modulation, but I'm going to try and keep the common chord analysis consistent. This is 5-6 of 2 because it's an E major triad in first inversion, and E is the dominant of A minor, which is the 2 in G major, which is the 2 in G major. So if we modulate back to A minor, this is no longer 5 of 2 or 5-6 of 2, it's just 5-6. And then we get a 1 chord in root position with a passing 7th in the bass. And then we get a 6 chord, and it's really clear that we've modulated back to A minor here because F natural is now being seen along with G sharp. It's a really interesting leap here. We're leaping from G down here, an augmented octave up. I know that this is happening after a fermata, so there's time to reset, but still, that leap is pretty gnarly. So 6 with another passing 7th in the bass, and then we have D, F, A, and B. That is, I guess it depends on how you, no, there's really no debate there. That is a 2 chord that is half diminished, and it's in first inversion. So that is a B minor 7 flat 5 over D, or a D minor 6 for the jazz savvy. No, actually, that's not true. Minor 6 chords function as a, when you give it that label, they function as a tonic or a predominant, not as a dominant like this is, or I guess this is functioning like a predominant. But that was a tangent that was totally irrelevant. This is a 2 chord in first inversion, or 2/7 chord. Then we have E, E, G sharp, and B with the passing 7th and the tenor. This is just a 5 chord. And then we cadence on 1, perfect authentic cadence. So if we look ahead, our next cadence is on E major, and this is a half cadence. We don't modulate to E major. That'd be very uncharacteristic of this time period, because E major is quite distant from A minor on the circle of fifths, and Bach usually modulates in and around the keys that he started in, so we're usually not modulating more than 1 notch on the circle of fifths, and because we're right at the top at 12 o'clock right now, he's usually going to 11 o'clock at F, or in D minor, or to G in E minor. But this is not a Picardy third situation. This is still very much A minor. So we get another 1 chord here, no need to reanalyze. We then have B, D, A, and D, with the G sharp here as well. I think this A is a accented non-chord tone. It's G sharp, B, and D that's being accented here. It is or being intended here. It's a 7/6 chord, a G sharp diminished over B. And then we have C, E, A, and C. That's A minor in first inversion, a 1/6. D, F, A, and B. Again, that is a 2/6/5. This is half diminished. Passing tones going on here. And then we have F, A, or F, E, A, and A. I think really what's happening here is this E is another non-chord tone. There's just counterpoint going on in anticipation for the cadence. And this is really just a big 4/6 chord. Because it's the F, the D, the A, and the A with a big voice cross here where the alto's singing a 5th below the tenor. That's really interesting. And then we get a 5 chord. And again, this is another example of a Phrygian half cadence, 4/6 going to 5. That half step down gives it sort of like a Phrygian dominant sound. Mixed my words there. Okay, so if we look ahead to the next cadence, we get another cadence on G major. Is this a half cadence in the key of C, or is this a authentic cadence, or an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of G? This one sounds more like an authentic cadence in the key of G when compared to the first one. So that's how we're going to go ahead and label it. This is an imperfect authentic cadence, but something strange happens later on. Stay tuned. We have an A minor chord here on the next beat. We don't need to reanalyze this because it's literally hold on. I don't want to use the word literally there. We have some vocal exchange. E goes into the tenor and G sharp goes into the alto, but it's still an E major triad. We have an A minor chord there. And because we're modulating the G, go ahead and call that our common chord again. Seeing a common theme here, we have G as our common chord, or A minor was our common chord when modulating to G before. Okay, sorry, I have the sniffles. Then we have B, D, G, and D. That is a G major triad. Sorry, that shaky line there. In first inversion. We then have C, C, G, and E. A root position C major triad. And then we have passing tones going on in the lower voices. We then have A, E, A, and C. It's a 2-chord. Root position, passing 7th in the bass. F sharp, A, and D. It's a D major triad in first inversion, or 5/6. Passing tone in the bass. B, D, G, D. Another 1/6 chord, a G major in first inversion. Passing tones in the upper voices. Oh my goodness, what am I talking about? That's not a 1/6 chord. Goodness, what am I talking about? That F sharp is not the passing tone. That C is not the... Well, that C is a passing 7th, actually. This is not a 1/6 chord. This is a 5 chord in root position. Sorry, I was looking at that. It was just D, D, G, and D. So like an open 5th, something that you'd like find in Renaissance music. But no, the G is the accented non-chord tone here. And then we get... It's kind of like a 4/3 suspension over the D. Accented non-chord tone. That's what most of them end up being. Some type of suspension, either up or down. And then we get it's just 5 going to 1. That makes a lot more sense. And here is interesting because we get another cadence on G major. So you're thinking, oh, well, okay, we have another imperfect authentic cadence in G major. But look what happens immediately after that G. We get F naturals again. And even though we get an F sharp right here, this cadence, no matter how many times I listen to it, sounds like a half cadence. We get a cadence on G now that is a half cadence. So we're getting a modulation to C major now from G, even though we're cadencing on G major. So here we'll call this G our common chord. Now that we're in the key of C, we will call it 5 because it's now our dominant. And all we get here is F in the bass. It's the same chord, so the Roman numerals change. It's now a 7 chord, or not the Roman numerals, sorry, the figured bass. The 4 is now in the bass, so it is a G7 over F. We then have E, G, G, and C. First inversion C major triad. Then we have D, A, F, and D. That is a 2 chord in root position in the key of C major. You might even make an argument that the A is the accented non-chord tone, and this is actually a 7. So depending on how you analyze it, this might actually be a 7 chord in first inversion. But then again, 2 and 7 share 2 tones. Really, how you analyze it, it doesn't really matter, so long as you're consistent. I'm going to call it a 2. C, C, E, and E, the passing tone in the tenor, that is just a 1 chord in root position. And then we have B, E, A, and C. This B is an accented non-chord tone. We have A, E, A, and C. That's a 6 chord. A minor. Remember, we're in the key of C major right now. So we have B, D, A, and D. Again, suspension going on. This is just A over B. That would be a 7/6 suspension that gets interrupted by the bass changing. So this is definitely a 5 chord in first inversion, G major over B. And then we have kind of a C, D, G. Really what happens here is just the bass changes, but this accented non-chord tone complicates things a little bit. And the bass changing also complicates things more. D, A, F sharp, D with a passing 7th and a passing tone in the alto, so 2 passing tones in the upper voices. This is 5, 5. And then we cadence on 5. This sounds like a half cadence to me. I don't think we get a modulation back. This is just what it sounds like to me. And even with the F sharp being introduced as late as it is, it sounds like a half cadence. No, sorry, goodness, I'm like mixing up my thoughts today. The F sharp is introduced a lot later than the other ones in proximity. Like here we get it 1 beat before, or 2 beats before rather. Here we get it 1 beat before, so it's not quite in our ears. And then we have another augmented 7th leap. or augmented seventh, sorry, augmented octave leap. So we'll go ahead and say that this 5-6 of 2 right here, again, is our pivot chord to A minor, which is just 5-6. Remember here, 5-6 of 2 is our pivot to A minor. It's just an E major triad in first inversion. We then go to 1, A minor, A, E, and C, passing tones 3 of the voices. That would be a G, B, E, and B. And this G natural, I feel like this is just counterpoint more than trying to create harmony, because that would be a minor 5. No real need to analyze it. Then F, C, A, and A. That is a 6 chord in the key of A minor. F major is the 6th, the submediant. We then have a passing 7th in the bass. D, F, A, and B. That is our 2 chord. It is a 2 chord in first inversion, and it is half diminished. So 2 half diminished 6, 5. And then we have E, E, G sharp, and B with a passing 7th in the tenor, which is just a 5. And then we get an uppercase 1, a perfect authentic cadence in the key of A minor. Okay, pretty quaint chorale. Really the most interesting part of this chorale is the cadences. Is this an imperfect authentic cadence, or is it a half cadence? I don't know. If it is a half cadence in the key of C, if it is a half cadence, that's totally analyzable. This 2, instead of 2, would be 6, because we're thinking in terms of C. And then this would become 5 of 5 to 5, and then it's just basically long 5. And same thing here. Is this an imperfect authentic cadence in C? Or is it, or in G, or a half cadence in C? Personally, I think it sounds more like an imperfect authentic cadence in G, but I'll leave that up to you to decide, and so long as your analysis is consistent, that's what matters the most. That being said, thanks for watching the video. I appreciate it. I'm going to be bringing more analysis. I've really just started to dig in. I think this is episode 23 or so now. It's kind of crazy that 23 days have gone by. These analyses make time pass so much faster, but I'm honestly super fascinated with the music. The chorales are a delight to analyze, and I'm hoping that we get some more exciting chorales in the future, because I'm really having to dig deeper than like the modal chorales that we've looked at, in like sort of like the early teens. I'm looking forward to more modal chorales, but I'm analyzing the anthology I have in order, and I'm going to stay true to the order regardless of how much of a dry spell we have regarding the interesting chorales, or what I'm calling interesting. Every chorale is interesting in its own way. In fact, if a chorale is very quaint and functions the way the textbook would tell you that it should function, that in and of itself is very interesting. So lots of things to keep in mind. Thanks for watching the video. Take care.